Hello, 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 and welcome to our third episode of Growing Grand. I'm Lamont.
And I'm Youssef.
And we are pretty happy to be here today because we are going to have a variety show about plants and crops.
Plants?
Yes, absolutely.
There's all kinds, right?
It's
Where do
weird.
you start?
It's weird to think about that there's all kinds of plants. I was just flipping through one of those books looking at all the things, and I'm like, I can't imagine how we can begin categorizing all these
where do
things.
plants come from? You know?
The ground,
Something
maybe.
like that. Seeds? Something like that?
Seeds? Do all of them come from seeds?
Mostly, actually. Some of them you take cuttings, so you can take like a piece of the leaf or the root, and you spread it that way. Like a potato, you don't plant potato seeds. You take a piece of the tuber, which is a root, and you put it in the ground and it starts growing.
Oh, wow. Well, that's really interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
and there's a cool history with all the different crops, because what we grow now, we've bred, and they look completely different than what they used to. And in the next few weeks, we'll probably have a show specifically on plant breeding, but we got enough to cover just with what's already out there.
Yeah.
Right? But it's cool that when you're breeding things, it really shows you the variation that's possible, especially with, say, the Brassica family, right?
Yeah. These Brassicaceae.
So they came from like a wild mustard plant.
A wild mustard plant.
Yeah, so it's just like a plant family. And
Like greens?
Yeah, it's just like a wild herbaceous plant.
Okay.
It's like a soft tissued plant. But we bred it like with cabbage, so that the top part of growth curls up into a head.
Oh, weird.
Leaves, right? Yeah.
It started off as the plant, and then you breed it, and then now it grows heads?
Yeah. Or Brussels sprouts are in that same family, and they're weird too, because they grow up tall, and then like almost underneath their armpits, they have a bunch of buds that like curl together.
Oh, yeah.
So it's the same process as the cabbage, but instead of one big one on the top, you have a bunch of small ones on the stem.
I always thought Brussels sprouts were really weird because they're so tiny. It's like tiny little cabbages, little bite-sized cabbages.
Exactly, that's exactly what they are. And you get multiple per plant. Like kohlrabi, it's also in that family. That's a crop that a lot of people really haven't heard of before.
Yeah, what is a kohlrabi?
Kohlrabi is in the Brassica family, but it's bred so that the base of the stem gets really fat. And so you eat that.
You eat the stem?
You eat the stem.
I feel like that's a little different because broccoli is also in the family, right?
So with broccoli and same with cauliflower, they're bred so that their flowers are what you eat.
Oh.
So like if you let a broccoli plant keep going, those little green buds on top will eventually open up and have like these yellow flowers. So it's pretty cool.
Oh,
and then, like say kale, that was bred for the leaves.
Mm-hmm.
So this particular family just really draws attention to how versatile plants can be and how much we can really suit them for our needs in our particular context.
Yeah, I'd actually never considered that before, but if they're all in the same family, they're the same kind of plant, and we're just kind of growing different parts of them depending on our tastes.
Right, and because there's always a trade-off of resources for individual organisms, right?
Mm-hmm.
So if something can withstand the cold, like we look outside here, there's some evergreens, like there's a pine out there, that has its needles even during the winter, whereas these like aspens and maples, they don't have their leaves.
Yeah.
Well, the aspen and maples, their leaves are like really thin and fragile, but when they're around, they're really productive.
Oh.
Whereas the pine needles aren't quite as productive, but they're much hardier.
Oh, okay.
So it's just like this trade-off, right? So when you're looking at the Brassica family as an example, like the plant can devote its energy into having a really fat stem like kohlrabi, or it can devote its energy to have the top bud curl really tight like cabbage.
Okay.
But it's hard to do both.
So we see the plants trying to kind of work in what's best for them as well.
And there's a lot of variation that can happen based on what they like in the environment. But we're gonna hold off on that stuff for now.
Yeah, absolutely.
See, I can keep going a little bit.
Okay, so there's a lot of in depth about the Brassica family there,
right?
But I thought it'd be fun if we just went through and kind of learned a little bit about a lot of different plants.
Sure.
So
we're gonna rapid fire some
veggies at you, and have you tell us a little bit about each of them, and we'll try to keep it short so we can get through a pretty good list of them.
Sure. So I guess what I'll do then is try and give you the most important relevant information on these veggies. So I'll tell you when you can grow it. Most of these veggies we can grow in Michigan. So we can tell you what part of the season we can grow, how long it takes, and what part of the plant you harvest.
Yeah, absolutely.
So what's first?
Let's start with onions.
Onions. Okay, so onions are in the allium family. So you eat the root of it. At least sometimes. Sometimes you eat the green tips, but there's different types of onions. Onions are usually pretty cold hardy. They don't like it like freezing cold, but it can tolerate some cooler temperatures. So like in our hoop houses, we have onions going. That's one of the most prolific things right now.
Oh, okay.
But we grow green onions. So green onions are just a little bit different than, say, those bulb onions that you get, because they grow faster. You harvest them when they're smaller. But the bulb onions that you typically get in the grocery store, like the yellow onions or something, they take a little bit longer, and they're also affected by the amount of sunlight that they get.
Oh,
so
yeah.
It's like a seasonality thing.
Okay.
But if you let them get big enough, then they can store.
Well, nice. All right, so let's move from onions to garlic.
Garlic, sure. So it's in the same family. It's similar. But with garlic, it's really cool. You mentioned earlier about planting seeds.
Oh,
You don't plant garlic seeds necessarily. What you do is you plant the cloves. So at the bottom of the garlic plant, it has all these different cloves that you can break up.
Oh,
and
into
then
the
you
different
plant
chunks
those.
Okay.
Right.
So if you guys don't mind me asking, what do you do with the seeds then? Are you able to
Garlic seeds?
Mhm.
Well, you actually can plant them, but they form a little differently. So the seeds that come from garlic, they're called like bulbils. So I'm going to pull it up on Google right now. But they're almost like mini tubers. So I'll turn that around for you to see, Lamont. And so with the bulbils, if you plant those, you'll get a head of garlic in 2 years.
Okay.
So
okay.
if you plant like a clove of garlic, you'll get a whole bulb of it the next season. So garlic you typically plant in the fall. Sometimes you can get away planting it in the early spring. But it typically overwinters, and then you harvest it in the summer, and then you dry it out and store it indefinitely.
Wow. Well, garlic lasts a long time then.
Right. So when you dry it, you can do cool things like garlic wreaths or like rope. There's hard neck garlic, soft neck garlic.
Yeah, for the vampires, right?
Yeah,
For the vampires.
Right.
Vampires aren't, a real thing, so.
Something like that. But, it's cool with the garlic because in each clove they have a different number. So if you want to try your own little breeding experiment, it acts really quick, where say you could save the garlic that has the biggest cloves, and then you can get bigger and bigger ones over time.
Oh, wow.
But now you don't necessarily want a head of garlic that only produces 4 cloves, because that means next year you can only get 4 heads.
Oh, I see.
Because you break it up, right?
Yeah.
Whereas if you had 20 cloves, you can
got
get
a
20
lot
heads.
more garlic, yeah.
But then it's not as easy to use. But
Well, hey, that's
plenty on garlic.
That's a really fun thing. It's like garlic is a bunch of puzzle pieces. So
And so we grow some purple kind too at the farm. That's pretty cool.
yeah, that's awesome. All right.
Enough
So
on garlic.
we're talking about this garlic and these onions, but what about the sweet strawberries?
Strawberries. Oh, you can never have enough strawberries. So strawberries are cool. They're a fruit that grows really short, and it's a perennial. So say like tomato, it's also a fruit, but you plant it from seed.
Yeah.
Strawberries, they spread out from these things called runners. So you have like your individual plant, and then it sends out like these tentacles.
Like vines. And
Yeah,
things.
and then those go out, and then they can root themselves and become a new plant.
What?
Right.
That's weird.
And so typically with strawberries, you buy them bare root. That's the best value. So, and you do that in the spring.
Okay.
And so with strawberries, they last multiple seasons, but after about 3 or 4 years, their productivity goes down a little bit because they get so dense, they choke themselves out a little bit.
Oh no. They're
So
taking
after
over
that, well, it's not a bad thing because you have more plants. You just dig up the plants, you thin it out, and then it
they
becomes
can
more
move
productive.
around. Or
Yeah, so
giving us some other people.
once you get a little bit, exactly, you can get your source to keep spreading it.
Well, that sounds kind of spooky though. The vines taking over your whole garden.
Hey, I don't know if anybody would be mad about having strawberries.
I guess that's pretty true. So carrots. I know carrots don't have vines. Tell me a bit about carrots.
Sure. So carrots are a really cool plant and one of our favorites over at the farm. So carrots, they're a root veggie, and they are a bit more cold tolerant, but you can grow them really any time of year. In fact, so it's February 1st or second today, we could plant them in the hoop house if we wanted to. Last year we planted them this time, and we would harvest them, say in April or ish.
Okay.
When you get towards the edge of the season, things don't grow as fast because there's not as much sun. But
sunlight,
in peak conditions for carrots, you'll get a crop in like 50, 60 days.
Nice.
So they're pretty quick.
Yeah, carrots grow quick.
And one cool thing about carrots, growing them in the winter at least, is when it gets really cold, all the sugars that are in their leaves go down into the roots. So the carrots become sweeter.
Oh, it changes the taste.
Changes the taste.
Oh, that's great.
Right. So
That's interesting.
yeah, the temperature affects a lot of things. Like with greens, for example, like lettuce or spinach or something. If it's too hot, then they'll get really bitter as they start to try and go to seed.
Oh, wow.
Yeah, but we'll hold off on that for now. What's
I
next?
I actually read a thing about carrots yesterday. I was talking about how when your carrot looks good, like it's the good color and everything, then it's a quality to eat at that point in time, even if it might not be the size you want it to be. Is that true?
You can really eat them at any size. So when they're really small, actually baby carrots aren't small carrots. This is a bit of a side tangent. But baby carrots that you buy in the store are actually really long carrots, really long skinny carrots that they cut up.
Oh,
And
we've been all been fooled.
Something like that. But yeah, so carrots are cool because you got some flexibility, especially if you plant them into the fall. Like I know farms that go out to their fields in the winter and dig up carrots. They're fine just in the ground. Now you don't want to leave them in for too long because like carrots are a biennial, meaning they take 2 seasons to mature and set seed, at least typically. And once they start to go to seed, then the center of their roots get really tough and kind of woody. So they're best when they're young and
so they kind of change textures when they get older and everything. Okay.
Yeah, and so there's different color carrots, like there's purple ones, red ones, yellow ones.
Oh, fun.
Ones.
All right, I didn't mean to keep you talking about carrots for a while.
Oh,
I was
boy.
curious about that. But
Yeah.
what about sweet potatoes now?
Sweet potatoes.
Talking about some potatoes.
Yeah, so sweet potatoes are not actually related to potatoes. They're completely different.
Whoa. Wait,
and-
really?
Yeah, and so sweet potatoes are like a
Never
vine.
would've guessed.
So a lot of people will grow them like ornamentally in their gardens and like planter boxes. But yeah, so sweet potatoes, they kind of creep out and you eat their roots.
Ooh.
And you don't plant them from seed. You plant them from, they're called slits, something like that. Basically, you sprout them, and you plant from that. So you could take it and put it in like a jar of water, and then you get all this new growth coming off from it, and then you cut it, and then you plant those, and then they'll multiply.
Okay.
So if you get a nice big sweet potato, you might get 13 plants from it or something like that.
Nice. So potatoes.
Slips. That's what
Slips. Okay. Well, potatoes don't work that way. So how do potatoes work?
Well,
then?
they're kind of similar, but they don't vine as much. So potatoes are actually in the tomato family, the nightshade group.
What?
So we can go on that more in a minute. But yeah, potatoes. So they're a root. So they're similar to sweet potatoes, but they grow from like eyes. So not like the eyes that you see. If you've ever left a potato out in the sun, sometimes you'll start to see them grow off the sides. But you split those.
Okay.
And there's actually some really cool stuff you can do with potatoes. So potatoes are not cold hardy at all, so you have to do it in the summer. Typically they take about 70 days, but depends on the varieties, whether you want the really small potatoes or the big ones. Similar to carrots, you can harvest them when they're really baby, but it's not quite as productive.
Yeah.
You might as well wait a few weeks.
Why do you want the baby ones?
Yeah, well, sometimes they taste better.
I know the little red baby ones taste delicious.
Yeah, and there's all sorts of kinds of potatoes. And in a few weeks, we'll talk about this book, Garden of Invention. So this is about a guy named Luther Burbank, and he came up with the russet potato.
Oh, he invented the
Burbank
potato.
russet, yeah.
Oh, wow.
He didn't invent the potato. Potatoes were around.
Yeah, potatoes were around.
But
that
before him, they were like all the funny shapes, like random colors, like purple.
Oh, okay, I see.
And not consistent.
Yeah.
He actually found a potato plant that had a seed pod on it and planted seeds from it. And he got 22 seeds from it. And out of 2 of them were big, white, fleshy potatoes, and one of them ended up to be the one that has spread all over the world.
Wow.
But more on Burbank another time.
Yeah, more on Burbank another time. For now, let's talk about turnips.
Turnips, they're cool. So turnips, I never had a turnip before I came to the SAP.
Really?
Yeah, at least not that I know of. So turnips are a root veggie, and they grow pretty quick. If you want to harvest them at a baby size, they might be ready in 30 days, but typically about 60 for a nice solid.
Okay.
Sometimes even longer. But again, it depends on the variety. But turnips are pretty cold hardy. In the hoop house, they do okay during the winter. And yeah, they're a nice, easy one to grow. Now with turnips though, you harvest it once and you're done.
Yeah.
Whereas other crops, like say a tomato, you can keep harvesting it over and over.
I used to play Super Mario 2 for the Nintendo, and in Super Mario 2 on the Nintendo, you have Peach. She pulls turnips out of the ground, and it's very funny when she does that, little smiley faces on it. But they're gone after that. It's always sad to see them fly off the screen.
Right.
Just like in real life.
So we have this kind of turnip, they're like a Japanese style turnip called Hakurai. Sometimes they're called Tokyo turnips, but they're white, and they're very crisp, and you can eat them raw, just like an apple. They're like one of my favorite treats out of the farm. And it's interesting because, like I've said, I never had turnips before I went there, and now they're one of my favorites.
Oh, good times, man.
And so turnips are kind of related to radishes, so maybe I'll just bring up the next one.
Radishes.
Very similar, but they're even faster. So you don't
faster than 30 days?
Sometimes in peak conditions, you can get them in 20.
What?
Yeah, so they're one of the fastest growing vegetables. And yeah, they're about golf ball size ideally. And yeah, you eat the root on them.
I know they're very strong, like the flavor in a radish is very strong.
Yeah, so it's like kind of got that peppery, pungent taste to it. And that's a taste that's consistent with other things in the Brassica family. So they're actually in the Brassica family too.
Oh, wow, okay.
They're not as closely related, but yeah. But so that kind of peppery taste you also see in like mustards and like wasabi. Wasabi comes from mustard. I don't know if you knew that.
No, I didn't.
Yeah, so it's pretty cool.
Well, nice. Let's talk about corn.
Corn.
I mean,
everybody's favorite.
Everybody's
right?
favorite corn. Corn is
is
everywhere.
Right. So corn's an interesting one. So it's obviously, well, maybe not obviously, but it's the most prolific crop in the country. It's everywhere.
See it everywhere.
But the corn that you typically see grown doesn't go at least directly for people. It's usually for ethanol or animal feed. But the corn that's in people's minds is like sweet corn.
Yeah.
So it grows similar. It likes it warm. Doesn't like the frost at all.
No.
And it takes a while though. Somewhere between 80, 110 days, depending on the variety. Sometimes.
So do the sweet corn stalks grow the same way that the almost like an industrial corn?
Yeah, they grow up and then they'll have multiple ears that come off them. Usually 2.
They grow very tall. Those things are really strong too.
Yeah, if they're healthy. I've tried to grow up, like the first time I tried to grow up corn was in a shady spot, like at my parents' place, and they're really sad and didn't do good. So corn is one of those things that really benefits from a lot of space, light, and fertility. But so it takes a long time, and you only get a couple ears from it. So for us at the SAP, we don't grow much because it just doesn't quite work out with our space.
Sounds like a lot more effort if you're not growing a ton of it.
And it's something that's a lot easier to harvest with machines. So we'll let people with machines take care of it. We'll grow some other stuff.
Yeah, absolutely. Like celery, right?
Well, celery, but let me talk just for a second on the corn.
Oh, okay, sure.
There's a farm just across the river from us called Lubbers Farm. It's a really amazing place, cool story on the farm. Won't get into it too much right now, but in their garden, I went there on a tour, and they had this corn that was 15 foot tall.
15 feet.
15 foot tall.
That's
and it had
crazy.
like 4 or 5 ears on it, which was like, I've never seen anything like that.
I've never seen anything
So,
like that either.
come to find that one of the people that used to work at their farm was from Guatemala, and that was like an old Mayan heirloom variety of corn.
Oh.
Right. So we took some of those seeds and we planted them in the hoop house, and there was no more room in the hoop house for it to grow. It was touching the top.
Wow.
15 foot tall.
Oh, yeah, get some pictures of that stuff.
Yeah. So actually growing in the hoop house for corn isn't ideal because it's wind pollinated.
Mm-hmm.
So a lot of veggies, you hear about bees. Bees are really important.
Yeah.
Corn, they don't use bees. It's all about the wind. So
about the wind.
you kind of need a lot of corn in an area.
Yeah, that kind of explains why it's all growing like that together too.
Right.
Generally in the big fields.
Right.
Well,
So what did you say next? Celery?
Yeah, celery.
Yeah, so celery is a cool one. I actually haven't grown it much, but it's really common in Hudsonville. So just south of us a little bit. Hudsonville is kind of known as the salad bowl city of Michigan. And they grow a lot of celery there, like the muck fields. So muck is like old wetland soils, really high in fertility, organic matter, and whatnot. But celery grows relatively fast, and it's kind of cold hardy. But to be honest, I don't have a whole lot of experience with celery. It's one of those that when you're harvesting it with machines, you can do it really efficiently, and I just don't have a lot of experience with celery.
What about chard?
Chard. Yeah, so
chard.
Swiss chard.
Swiss chard.
So there's different kinds, right?
Yeah. I know
they're really cool ones.
People generally group Swiss chard and kale together. Too. I feel like I hear that pretty often, where they say Swiss chard
similar,
and kale.
right? But they're different families entirely.
Okay.
So kale, you eat the leaves.
Yeah.
Swiss chard, you eat the leaves. And with Swiss chard, their leaves and their stems come in all sorts of colors. Like there's rainbow varieties with like reds and pinks and yellows and whites.
Yeah, that's what
so they're really pretty. They're cold hardy and they grow relatively fast. You can harvest them at a baby stage in like maybe 40 days.
Mm-hmm.
But we have a Swiss chard plant in the hoop house right now that's like 2 years old. Just kind of a crazy experiment.
The grandfather plant.
Well, I tried to kill it basically only by cutting off the leaves instead of pulling out the roots.
Mm-hmm.
And one of them just has been kicking it.
Oh, wow.
So
now we feel pretty attached to it.
Yeah, I don't have the heart to
Does it have a name?
Not yet.
Oh, maybe we'll get a name for it.
Right. If you have a cool name for a Swiss chard plant, why don't you leave a comment or something.
Oh, yeah, absolutely.
And we can name it after you. But Swiss chard is pretty cool. It's actually in the spinach family, believe it or not.
Spinach?
Yeah.
Okay.
So spinach is another green. It doesn't get as big as Swiss chard. Swiss chard, the leaves will get like 12 plus inches long.
Huge.
Spinach, typically, they're smaller. But yeah, they're in the same family, and spinach is one of the cold hardiest plants there are.
Oh, it's kicking through everything.
Yeah. So cold really doesn't hurt it. The snow and ice will, so if you just keep it protected a little bit, it'll survive over the winter. It doesn't like it in the summer too much. If it's too warm, the leaves will start to get kind of bitter as the plant goes into reproduction mode and starts to try and go to seed. That's a process called bolting.
Bolting?
Bolting.
Okay.
Yeah. And the plants look so much different. When they're bolting, they get like really tall and all these seed stalks, and yeah, they're pretty cool.
Nice. So, what about peas now?
Peas, yeah. I love peas. Peas are another cold hardy one.
They're super weird and
Yeah,
really soft when you cook them. And
So a lot of people think of peas as like the ones, like peas in a pod.
yeah.
We typically grow like the snap peas.
Snap peas?
Yeah, you can just pop the whole entire pod in your mouth, and you typically don't eat it with the peas themselves.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
So there's the little balls, right?
Yeah, those are the seeds.
Those are the seeds.
So if you let those keep maturing on the plant, they'll eventually harden.
Mm-hmm.
So if you buy dried peas, that's where they come from.
Yeah.
Yeah, they're really nice when they're young and tender.
So you can get them in the like green beans almost. How they come
they're
in
actually
those,
related to beans. So I'll talk about the beans in a second. But they're both in the legume family. Legumes. So legumes are commonly known for their nitrogen fixing ability. Legume.
What a fun word to say.
So nitrogen is like the most common element in our atmosphere, but it's in a triple bond. Plants can't really pull it apart and utilize it. But things in the legume family have this beneficial bacteria in their roots that can break apart that nitrogen and turn it into a form for the plants to be able to use.
Oh, wow.
So in a sense,
Okay.
they're pulling nitrogen from the air and putting it back into the soil.
Wow.
Yeah. And so peas, in terms of how they grow, they sometimes like the vine. So if you put them on a trellis, they can get relatively tall. But there's also bushes in that, just like beans. So it's a good transition there. Beans, there's a few different kinds. There's like the green beans that are kind of young, tender looking ones.
My family likes pinto beans.
Pinto
a lot.
beans. So with pinto beans, they're like a dried bean, right? So I'm not sure if you can eat them when they're young. You probably can. But in one of those green beans or yellow beans or purple beans, there's all sorts of colors of them. If you let the seed develop, it'll eventually harden and dry, and then that makes it easier to store, in your cupboard or something like that.
Okay.
And typically dry beans are harvested by machines because they all ripe at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Whereas green beans, they grow really fast. By the way, peas take about 80 days. I think I missed that.
Okay, yeah.
Green beans, they take about 60 days to mature. They're really fast, sometimes even faster. And there's different kinds, but the main kind that we like to grow, you can keep harvesting them every week. Sometimes multiple times a week.
So you're growing.
And you actually
fruits
have to
instead, you
keep
just
harvesting them, because if you don't harvest them, then they start to go to seed, and then it just changes a little bit.
Wow. Well, that sounds kind of nice. How
Yeah.
many? I'm wondering about the kinds of things that you can do that with. Then is there a name for that? Like being able to continually. You're talking about the perennial versus. biennial
Continued
versus-
harvest.
Yeah, the continued harvest.
Continued
okay.
harvest. If you start talking about like greens, a term that's used a lot is cut and come again.
Okay.
So I don't know, pick and come again. Strawberries are similar to that too, at least some of them. Then with beans, there's the bush kind that will get maybe 2.5 foot tall.
Mhm.
But there's also pole beans that'll get like as tall as you let them. And some beans will grow like 21 inches long, like the bean itself.
Wow.
Yeah.
What are you doing with a 20-inch long?
I've
bean?
never grown them, to be honest.
I wonder how you would cook that.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe you just split it
I
up,
think
guess.
they're really common in like Asian cooking.
Okay.
Yeah.
Oh, you
But there's all
probably-
sorts of, when you start to look at vegetable varieties, we're doing a variety show here obviously. You start looking at like one of these seed catalogs, like this one's from Seed Savers Exchange. It has like more heirloom, old type varieties. There's all sorts of stuff in here, and it's really kind of fun to play around with. But when you're first getting started, it might seem a little overwhelming.
Yeah, there's like all this different stuff going on.
But you just kind of learn as you go,
Mhm.
and it doesn't have to be as complicated as sometimes we like to think.
Yeah.
Like,
It's not scary.
Yeah. Doesn't have to be scary.
when you start learning about something, the more you realize you don't know, but that doesn't mean you can't take a leap.
Yeah.
And even if it is a little scary, that's okay. Like, it's okay to be a little scared and try something new.
Yeah, let's slow down a little bit. We've been going on the variety show bit here, but
Sure.
I think it's a good opportunity to talk about something maybe people know a little bit about, but might not know a ton about. Like tomatoes are pretty big on the farm here.
Sure, so let's really dive into
Yeah,
tomatoes.
we can dive
'cause
into
there's
tomatoes
a lot
and-
there.
Yeah, so I know about the red ones, that we get at the stores that go on our hamburgers and that kind of thing, but those aren't even the most delicious tomatoes that I've had.
The tomatoes that you typically see in the grocery store, they're not bred for taste or nutrition. What they're bred for is shelf life and visual appeal, basically. But there's all sorts of variation in tomatoes. So you have like your standard, round red ones. But even with that, there's different size. So you go down to like the grape ones that are kind of mid-sized, right?
Mhm.
Where you can get like these big, nice heirlooms, like a brandywine. And those ones, we grew a tomato last year. It was a German Johnson, but it was 2 pounds. It's like
2-pound tomato.
like the size of like a baby's head. So it's really cool, and especially when you get into some of the heirloom varieties, like in the Seed Savers Exchange, or we get a lot of stuff from Johnny Seeds too.
Mhm. It's this
but-
one here.
Yeah, so the tomatoes come in all sorts of colors. Like you get striped ones, like striped green ones, striped red ones, cherry tomatoes that are even smaller than the grapes. You get paste tomatoes.
Okay. Paste tomatoes?
Paste tomatoes. So
What's a paste tomato?
a paste tomato, they're typically like longer like elongated,
Mhm.
and they don't have as much. They have like a dry, meaty flesh.
Okay.
So they're really good for making like salsas and marinaras.
Oh wow!
And that
They
sort of
use
stuff.
specific kinds of tomatoes for that.
Yep.
That kind of thing.
Yeah, but
Yeah.
stepping back a little bit with tomatoes, you can kind of group them into two main categories.
Mhm.
So, determinate and indeterminate.
Okay.
Okay, so determinate have like a predetermined size. So they grow more like a bush.
Oh, okay.
And they set their fruit all at once.
So it's
Okay.
like a one and go kind of
Right,
thing.
right.
All right.
So your harvest will be really big, but it's not for very long at all, right?
Mhm.
Whereas an indeterminate tomato, it's like a vine that'll keep growing and growing and growing, and as long as it has
Like
what
the
it
strawberries.
needs, but it'll produce for even longer.
Oh, all right.
Yeah, so once it starts producing, if you prune it and take care of it right, and maybe we'll have another show just on how to take care of tomatoes. It's really cool, some of the stuff you can do. But yeah, you can harvest tomatoes for a few months. I've
Wow.
even seen tomatoes that are like multiple years old.
Really?
Yeah,
I like
especially
that.
in tropical areas. We can't really do that in Michigan, but
I like that. I always thought that when you grew things, you might get it a couple times, but then it'd be done so. But apparently, you can be growing tomatoes for years. You can grow chard for years, and
yeah, and when you start thinking about the seasonality, like I kind of mentioned the timings of the year for
Yeah.
these different things. If you play around with it, in one bed you can get multiple crops. Like a radish takes 20 days, right?
yeah,
So what are you going to do? Prep your garden in the spring and plant your radishes, and then by the time June comes around, does not have anything in there? No, you plant something else. And so say you plant your radishes, and then you plant beans. Well, then maybe you plant your kale. It's not a huge amount of diversity, but 3 crops is better than 1, and it's pretty easy to do.
yeah. Those
So-
sound like some not that complicated things to grow too. The way you've been talking about.
Yeah, or interplanting. We could have a whole conversation on interplanting too. But if you just start to pay attention to how the plants like to grow,
Mm-hmm.
you can put the puzzle pieces together. It's just a big puzzle, basically, where you're figuring out the timing of things and what you like to eat. If you're farming, what will sell.
Mm-hmm.
And you just it's just a puzzle. You figure out where they go. You want to rotate your crops a little bit, because if there's a pest that gets in a bed, you don't want to put that same crop that's susceptible to the pest again.
You got to be cognizant of what the ecosystem's telling you.
Yeah, but that gets into some more complicated things.
Yeah.
But in general, if you want to raise a healthy plant, you take care of the soil, because the soil is it's like the immune system for your plants.
Yeah, absolutely.
Right.
So
And-
you're talking about tomatoes, and so peppers are also in the family of tomatoes.
Yep. So they're in like the Solanaceae family.
What?
Solanaceae.
Solanaceae.
Yeah, it's
Okay.
kind of a tongue twister, but people often just call them nightshades.
Okay.
Okay. So they're similar. I'm not sure what their most recent like common ancestor is, but they grow similarly. Both of them love the heat, although if it gets above 90, they don't like it that hot.
Okay. They all
but-
got those tiny little seeds in them.
Well, sometimes. So peppers, there's all sorts of shapes and sizes though. So
Mhm.
some peppers are like, they grow short, whereas some of them, you can grow them in the hoop house and they can get 10 foot tall, just
Yeah.
like the tomatoes. But there's like bell peppers, which are like the nice big blocky
huge
ones.
ones, yep.
Right. And so by the way, this is something people might not know. Green peppers, if you leave them on the plant long enough, they'll turn red or orange or a different color.
Is that how they get different colors?
They
That's how long
ripen.
they've been
It's
on
the
there?
ripening
Okay.
process, basically. Just like bananas. Like if you have a green banana, eventually it kind of turns yellow as it ripens.
Wow, I didn't know that. Yeah, I thought they were all just different.
Yeah.
Completely different.
Well, there's different
Oh.
varieties for sure.
Mhm.
And not all peppers are the same, obviously. But
We'll
yeah,
get
as
those-
they ripen, they change colors.
We get those ones with mixed colors and
Yeah.
everything.
And well, sometimes like they might start off like a really light green and then turn black.
Ooh, really?
Yeah, especially if you get into like hot peppers and stuff.
I didn't know I wanted a black pepper until right now.
Well, we grew this variety called like Hungarian black peppers before. They're a nice spicy pepper. But yeah, there's like chilies, which are like long and skinny, really spicy.
Oh,
If
yeah.
you get into hot peppers, honestly, I haven't grown too many because I'm kind of a baby when it comes to hot stuff. Like jalapenos and serranos are probably the extent.
Well, I like the spicy, but I know some of those peppers get way out of hand.
Personally, I fell in love with a variety that we grew this year called Lunchbox Peppers, and they're like these little orange and red. And
Oh, are those the
yellow
sweet
peppers
ones?
that are incredibly sweet.
Oh man, I'd never had those before until the fall when I went to the
Yeah,
South.
they're just perfect because
Yeah,
so they're a hybrid,
Mhm.
and one of the characteristics about them is they don't have that many seeds. So you can just
Yeah, you
basically
just
pop
pop
them
them in your
right
mouth.
in your mouth, and
And
they're
they-
only a few inches long, and they are just like the sweetest.
They're sweet and crunchy.
Uh-huh.
They're really satisfying to bite into.
Yeah, so
Absolutely.
it's always a struggle right now in the winter, like looking at these because I know I have some spring fever, but it's all fun. This time of year we get to play around and figure out what varieties that we're gonna grow of things because there's all these different varieties of vegetables, but within a variety, like with tomatoes we mentioned,
Yeah.
there's like 500 plus varieties that you can choose from.
Oh my goodness.
So-
It's crazy anticipation, right?
Yes, it's sometimes a little torturous looking at it all, but it's a good place to be in, I guess.
Well, all right. Well, we talked a bit about tomatoes, so
Yeah.
maybe
Well, one more in that family, eggplant.
eggplants. Yeah.
Eggplant, they're in the same family. So
What, eggplants are in the tomatoes family and not in the squash and like gourds and things?
yeah, they're in the Nightshade family. So eggplant, they take about 80 days or so from when you plant them. They don't like
Okay.
it hot. They don't like the cold at all. But they come in different shapes and sizes too. Like we're used to seeing like the standard like kind of black purpley one.
Mm-hmm. That big weird shaped one.
Yeah, but
It's on
some of
Courage the
them are
Cowardly
white.
Dog.
Some of them are like
White.
hmm So that's kind of where they get their name. If you see like an eggplant like coming out of it,
Yeah.
it
Is
looks
that-
like an egg.
Are they like that when they're babies, or is that just
Yeah.
a different breed? Or
No, it's like there's white varieties. There's like
Yeah.
purple varieties. And
well, I'm just wondering how did the purple eggplant get to be the eggplant that we like eat and see most commonly?
That's a good question. I'm not sure.
Because
Popularity is nice and big, and
okay, yeah.
but there's other kinds that. So there's a color variation. Some of them are like kind of striped,
Mhm.
but other ones like they get really long. And yeah, so they're like skinny and long, and they're good for like slicing up. Now I'm thinking of some eggplant parmesan, but yeah, eggplant are really interesting. Like look at this. See that it looks just
Oh,
like
yeah, it
just
looks
like an egg.
just
So
like
you
an
see how
egg.
it gets the name. Anyway, so you mentioned squash.
Yeah,
Right?
squash.
So that's a whole other big family, the cucurbits family, and there's
cucurbits.
cucurbits.
Okay.
So that's a pretty broad family, and that includes things like zucchini,
Zucchini. Yeah.
summer squash. they're really
Everybody
summer.
grows those things,
Yep.
right?
If you want to grow anything in your garden, zucchini is like one of the first ones I'd recommend because it's so vigorous and fast. It doesn't like the cold at all, but like you can get it to mature and set fruit in like 45 days.
Yeah, I know
And they get to be monsters.
my roommates grew some zucchinis in their garden in our backyard, and those vines went like everywhere.
Yeah.
Like, it's crazy. It's kind of cool to see.
So
that.
with zucchinis, one thing you need to watch out for is make sure you pick them. So similar to the beans, like if you don't pick them, they'll just like get bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, to the point where sometimes you get like 2.5 foot long zucchinis
Wow.
that are like 5 inches in diameter.
I guess when you just let the plant live, it'll keep living.
Yeah, it'd be like boats or something. But yeah, so in that squash family, there's also cucumbers. My personal favorite.
Oh, cucumbers.
Yeah.
I wonder, did we ever tell that story about when I met you in the cucumber?
I'm not sure.
Because that was one of my favorite. That's like one of my favorite moments of Youssef on the farm. Is I'm there over the summer when the kids are there, because the kids are there for that. The You Challenge Youth.
I Challenge Youth.
I Challenge Youth. There we
Yeah.
go. The I Challenge Youth kids, and we're sitting around the little space in front of the sap and talking about the soil and seeds and everything. And Youssef just walks up with this really big cucumber, like it's a huge cucumber, and he sits down and he just grabs it with both of his hands and twists it in half. And I'm like, what's he gonna do with this? He's gonna throw it? Like, why is he just wasting that cucumber like that? He just starts eating it. Just literally twists a giant cucumber in half and just eats it.
It's the best thing in the world, man.
Just dripping all over the place. Must have been so delicious, like that cucumber.
You know, I grew up with cucumbers. My dad had a pretty big garden and some other things in our backyard. Birds, that's a whole other story. Pigeons. But yeah, the best thing is just like go out and find the little baby cucumbers, just like pick them off and eat them. They're so sweet when they're smaller. But yeah, there's all sorts of kinds of cucumbers too. Like there's ones that kind of have like the bumps on it. So like if you saw me twist it, I was probably just breaking off the bumps before I broke it.
There's a
rhyme or reason
to that.
Yeah, so some of them are like kind of smooth. Quick side note, probably not worth sharing, but something I used to do as a kid with cucumbers, especially if I had big ones, I'd like cut the top off and like take a spoon and like spin it out. Yeah.
Oh wow.
Yeah, there's like cucumbers that like there's a variety called lemon. There's like they look like lemons. They're round and yellow.
Weird.
Yeah, and there's like Armenian ones. They like get really long and like kind of fun, fuzzy. Yeah. And then there's pickles too. So pickles come from cucumbers. There's a variety of cucumbers basically. Actually, Michigan is like one of the top producers of pickles. It might be the top producer of pickles in the country.
Really?
Yeah, especially in the Saginaw area.
Oh man.
Yeah, we got some great soil for it.
A lot going for us here. And celery and cucumbers and what else?
Well, cucumbers, I guess. Yeah. A bunch of other stuff, but I could keep talking about cucumbers. But a few more things. How I like to grow them. So they grow on vines.
Okay.
Some of them are a bush type, but you can get them to grow really, really tall.
Okay.
So like in our hoop houses, we grow them up like strings, and yeah, you can get them to be like 10 foot tall.
Is that just cucumbers, or is it also like the other members of this
family? Other families, like say a melon, they'll grow a similar way, and you could potentially like grow them up tall. But the thing is, their fruits are so much heavier.
Melons in the same family?
Melons are in the same family as cucumber. Yeah. Yep.
That's
so
completely different.
You could grow like a watermelon up a string, and you could get like little hammocks for it. you really can. You can get hammocks for it, so it's like to help support it.
Yeah, doesn't sound like it'd work out too hot, but
no, you can actually get a lot of production if you do that.
Really, growing them up.
Now I am less inclined to do that because I have more space to grow out. You know, it's not quite as cost effective. But if you have a small space and you want to grow a lot of melons, yeah, get some hammocks.
Wow, that sounds pretty cool, actually.
Yeah.
It sounds like you could get a lot closer to your garden in that way. You know, you got to build a home for all of your.
Yeah, you take care of it.
Your fruits.
Yeah, so I just pulled up some images here of melon hammocks. You know, there's all sorts of.
Oh my gosh.
Sorts of stuff. Yeah.
They got towels in there and
so. This is definitely a side note, but since I'm seeing it in the images, there's like square watermelon.
Oh my gosh.
So this is big, especially I think in Japan, where you basically put a mold around it. So the watermelon, instead of growing round, it grows like a square.
You're molding the vegetables there.
Yeah. And there's similar to that, there's like Pear Buddhas. Have you ever seen those?
Are those the little? They look like little ruby things.
Well,
they got like fingers.
No, you can like put.
Oh my gosh!
mold.
Like literally, Buddha as a pear.
I would love that as a Valentine's gift.
Right? So hey, if anybody's good with like 3D design,
yeah, that's crazy.
We can go over to our 3D printer in the library and print out a mold like this and grow some fruits, and then if you have a funny shaped pear that looks like a Buddha, you could probably charge a little bit of money for it.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that before, though. That sounds really interesting.
Yeah, it's really cool.
Make any kind of a shaped fruit, vegetable thing going on there with that. I wonder what other kind of things are like popularized like that. Like, is that like a hard thing to do generally? Like to sit and take care of it, or
I've never done
it or anything? Well, hey, we might have to look that up and talk about it in the next show of it.
Yeah, so someone wants to help, I'd be happy to set things up. It seems pretty simple, and we have all the tools here. Like we have the 3D printer that we can use to make molds and stuff. But
so we're growing these these cucumbers and these melons up, and we gotta put hammocks if you want to do that because they might fall. But so how do these things harvest and everything? Is it the same way as a one and go, or is it?
Melon. So cucumbers, most of them you keep harvesting them.
Okay.
But with melons, you typically harvest them once, or at least within a shorter window.
Mm-hmm.
They take a little bit longer to mature, like maybe 80 to 100 days.
Okay.
But yeah, and then harvesting wise, there's a few like tricks you can do. Like if you tap on it and like if it sounds hollow, then it's probably right.
The old market trick, I see.
Yeah.
I remember my grandmother doing that all the time. You know, that's always fun stuff in the grocery store.
Uh-huh.
I feel like we do it nowadays just to feel cool anyway. Like, yes, I know what I'm doing.
Yeah, right. Can you really tell the difference? If you see a lot, maybe. But so similar to the squashes similar to the watermelon are squashes.
Mm-hmm.
So they're related too. So that might be like a butternut squash or a spaghetti squash. If you've never seen a spaghetti squash before, have you seen a spaghetti squash before?
I don't think I've seen a spaghetti squash.
Spaghetti squash is delicious.
Delicious?
Mm-hmm.
Oh man.
It's a good swap for spaghetti noodles.
Yeah. So with these squashes, they're really like stringy on the
What?
inside. So you bake them.
They just look like that?
Yeah, you just bake it, and then once they're like tender,
What?
you just take a
Feel
fork
free
to it.
pasta night.
Pumpkins are like not like stringy like that, but they have those same
Yeah.
kinds of in the guts like that.
So that when you're pulling out your seeds in your pumpkin,
Yeah.
it looks just like, so they're related.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, that does make sense. It does look kind of like a pumpkin.
So yeah, with these, you basically get like pasta noodles without even having to do anything. So they're pretty cool.
Might give that a shot. That
but-
sounds good.
It's easy.
Yeah, there's all sorts of kinds of squashes like butternut squash, acorn squash, hubbub squash. Fun fact: your pumpkin pie that everybody enjoys on Thanksgiving is not actually made out of a pumpkin.
What's it made out of?
A hubbub squash.
Hubbard squash.
Yeah, so they're like these blue, kind of weird shaped.
Ooh.
Yeah,
very
so they
pretty.
look like pumpkins.
Oh, you see those things on
Kinda.
the tables around Thanksgiving time
Yeah, like
too.
a cornucopia.
Yeah.
But yeah, so these just have a little bit better flavor than the most pumpkins that you see.
They do taste very delicious.
Yeah, it's just like a pumpkin. I mean, you can make pumpkin pie out of a pumpkin, but commercially most of them are done with actually a hubbub squash.
Well, nice.
Yeah.
Well, all right. Well, we just learned so much about crops and these different vegetables and fruits. It's really interesting about the two family, the main overarching families, the nightshade as well as the
Brassicas and then
Yeah.
probably the cucurbits.
cucurbits.
Yeah. So your tomato family, your broccoli family, and your cucumber family.
Yeah. It's really fun to say those words too, by the way.
Yeah.
Legume.
Feel a little scientific, right?
You feel a little bit scientific. But I think that'll wrap up our show a bit for today.
Sure.
And we talked a lot about these crops and things. We'll include a lot more information in case people want to investigate further about some of these things.
Right.
And we'll eventually do a show about gardening, smaller scale operations, where we'll go into a little more depth about how
to plant things.
plantings
Yeah.
and things like this.
And then, so something that I didn't mention at all today for varieties is flowers
Oh,
and
flowers.
herbs. We're gonna have to have a whole show on these
Oh.
themselves because I can
Yeah.
talk for a little while.
I've been
about flowers.
talking to Youssef.
Pretty excited about 'em.
About flowers, and I've been trying to get him to tell me about flowers. He's just like, so much. So
There
I think
is.
it is a good idea to have a show about it.
Maybe 3,
And flowers are really pretty, so they're always something you want to talk about.
right? And then herbs too. There's all sorts of kinds. Yeah, it's cool once you start to get into growing things. You kind of
There's a lot of things to grow,
right.
but
And it's something to look forward to. Like sometimes people get a little pessimistic about the conditions of the world, and there's a lot to think about. But you plant a seed that gives you a little bit of hope,
yeah,
right? So there's a little bit of uncertainty when you put it down, but then if you put in your care, then you get rewarded.
that is really satisfying.
Yeah.
I'm thinking about you say that, and I'm thinking about how over the fall I helped plant carrots, and I came back in October or November, and when I went and saw them, like they were like up out of the ground and like living, and that felt really good. I was like, oh man. I mean,
Mhm.
these aren't my carrots and everything, but I put them down there, and here they are, alive and well and making it.
Yeah.
And that is a satisfying feeling for
Yeah.
sure.
And then when you do that with a group of people, like when you come out to volunteer hours, you kind of get that shared connection.
Yeah, I really like that experience. It's a
Right.
pretty good one.
So it doesn't matter your background when you come out. If you do something together.
Yeah, because that's what we're doing. We're just
Feel-
planting the seeds and watching them grow.
Mm-hmm.
And wanted to make an announcement here about the GVSU Beekeepers Pure Michigan Honey.
Yeah, so you can pick some of this up from our beehives here
Mhm.
in Lake Ontario Hall on the 3rd floor. And there's $8 for a jar. Great stuff. If you have allergies, honey is one of the best things that you can eat because it has all the local pollen and stuff. And it's almost like with a vaccination, they give you
Mhm.
like a small dose of that stuff.
Okay.
That might make you sick. Pollen is in the honey. So
Yeah, that sounds pretty great
can dose you
actually.
a little bit. It's great stuff. And then book-wise, encourage y'all to join the book club on Facebook. Good Reads, Good Eats, Farm City, Novella Carpenter. So we're reading this throughout the semester.
Yeah, still been having some great conversations on
Yeah.
there about it. So if
Yeah,
you want to
check it
join
out.
in, just join in.
Yeah, there's a lot to get involved with, and I encourage you to dig in and take a jump.
So our next show,
We'll either do flowers or seed starting. So,
Yeah.
We didn't get into it too much about the specific varieties that we picked out for the farm this year. So if people want me to go in a bit more depth on how to pick the different varieties, we can do that.
Mhm.
But really, it's all up to the viewers and the listeners, right?
yeah,
So we're here for you. So what do you want to hear? Let us know.
yeah, let us know. And until next time, keep
growing.
growing.
Yeah, you can do it.
We kind of said it at the same time
Jinx.
there.